Hi guys. Okay, we're gonna jump in here for 3-3 notes. This is what you'll be watching on Wednesday, most likely. The good news is just one page. The bad news is the notation looks terrible, but like I always say, notation is much more terrifying than it actually is. So we're going to talk a little bit about inverse functions, and like I always like to do is bring it back to where is this going to show up on the AP exam. So this is going to be worth one multiple choice. This first part we do is one multiple choice question. Okay, I think it's an easy one. Again, if you're looking for 25 and you can memorize this little formula, then you can check off 1 out of 25, and it's going to be on there somewhere. So just as a quick reminder, inverse functions. I think I'll just write something easy out here. Some function 2x plus 1 to find the inverse. Early on in math, you were told, well, switch x and y, right? And make this the x over here and make that y. And then solve for your new y. And you would get 2y is equal to, if I subtracted 1, and then if I divide, I get x minus 1 all over 2. And then your teacher probably told you to rewrite it as an inverse, f inverse, x minus 1 over 2. That's not wrong, okay? That's fine. Once you got to pre-calc, what you should have been told is the definition of inverse functions is that if you plug one into the other, you should get 1. Okay? You don't have to memorize this, okay? But this is where the lesson is going to start. So in pre-calculus, you should have been told that if you plug one function into the other and you get 1, then they are inverses, right? For instance, if I took this and I plugged it up here, and I said 2 times x minus 1 over 2 plus 1. Well, my 2's would cancel, and x minus 1 plus 1 goes away. I'm sorry, did I say 1? That should be x. Sorry about that. And then the 1's go away, and you get x. And so this definition from pre-calc, that plugging a function into the other one and getting x, is the definition of inverse functions. So where this lesson starts is, given that, right? Given that f and g are inverse functions, differentiate it. Okay, so let's take the derivative of this. So if I start with f of g of x is equal to x, and I take the derivative, okay, we're going to use the chain rule. So the derivative of f is f prime of the stuff, but then it's times the derivative of the stuff, which is g prime. And then over here, the derivative of x is just 1. So let's solve for g prime of x then. Now I could say, well, g prime of x would be 1 over f prime of g of x. So I use the chain rule and I solved for it. You are not going to have to do that on the AP exam. What you are going to have to memorize is that. And this is worth one multiple choice question. So if you don't memorize it and you miss it, you're going to have to find 25 other ones that you can do. So what is this saying? This is saying the derivative of the inverse function is equal to this. Okay, and so let's do one example, and then we'll get going into the other stuff. So given this function, it has some inverse function g. Okay, we don't even know what it is. Find the derivative of that inverse function at 2. Well, let's use our definition here. This is the derivative of the inverse. And so we would say, well, g prime of 2 would be equal to 1 over f prime of g of 2. Okay, I have my students memorize 1 over fig. I know that that's just kind of stupid, but it does help you remember that the derivative of the inverse is 1 over fig. Okay, and so really this whole problem comes down to what the heck is g of 2? And that goes back to graphing knowledge, right? So think about an f function and an inverse g function. Every point on the f function, on the inverse, you would switch them, right? It's a reflection over the line y equals x. And so we're really looking for g of 2. Okay, we'll come over here, and what we're looking for here would be the y value. And so just a simple point here, if I plug in x as 1, I get a function value of 2. Well, on the inverse function, that tells me that 2 is equal to 1. Okay, and so that's my answer. That is g of 2, right? The g function evaluated at 2 is 1. And so this would become 1 over f prime of 1. And now all I have to do is find f prime. So f prime is 5x to the 4th plus 1. And so f prime of 1 is going to be 6 for a final answer of 1/6. So the confusing part, right? The confusing part, if assuming you memorized it, the confusing part is what the heck is this? Well, what you're really doing, you guys, to find g of 2, instead of 2 being an x value, what you're doing is you're coming up here and you're setting the y value equal to 2, and you're trying to figure out what x value gives me a y value of 2. And then this is going to be this easy. A lot of times they'll just tell it to you, but if they don't, just guess, right? Plug in 1, 1 to the 5th plus 1 would be 2. Okay, so that told me the point 1 comma 2 is on the f function, which means 2, 1 is on the g, and that's how I got that whole value as 1. Okay. All right, same thing down here. So I kind of mentioned up here that this is worth one multiple choice question. This would also be one multiple choice question. Okay, historically, right? I can't guarantee anything, but after 20 years of doing this, right, historically, this shows up as one question, and they want you to memorize it. Okay, this is just notation, so this is a recall, right? If you ever see arc sine, that's talking about inverse sine. Same thing with arc cos and inverse cos. These are all notation. They mean exactly the same thing. And so we'll just focus on one right here, and we'll go down and do an example with sine. So if you have a function y equals the inverse sine, how do you take the derivative? Well, you memorize it. Again, there are going to be things you have to memorize. It's just 1 over the square root of 1 minus u squared. So whatever u is, that's what you put there. And then this is, right, this is the derivative of u, right? So you can't forget to take the derivative of u. And so I'll leave this in the screen. And when we look down below, you guys can see right here, we'll do this example. It says y equals inverse sine of 4x squared. Find y prime. Okay, so we would just say y prime equals. Let's follow our rule. Let's do the bottom part first. So this is the square root of 1 minus u squared. Well, what's u? U is everything after your inverse trig function. So in this case, this is your u. So I would put 4x squared right there. And then the derivative of u is just the derivative of the u that you decided was 4x squared, which would be 8x. Okay, there's really nothing to do. They might simplify that and say that that's 8x over the square root of 1 minus, this is 16x to the 4th. Okay, but again, this is just a straight up memorization problem, and that's all you're supposed to do. Okay, so let's do the cosine. This looks really familiar. This is why it's easier to memorize than you think. Once you memorize sine, cosine is just negative. Okay, so there's nothing different. You do exactly the same thing, it's just negative. And so here, remember that that is the same as that notation. And so you would say, well, y prime is, I know it's a negative, right, because of that. And then downstairs, I have 1 minus u, which this time is x squared, times du, which is the derivative of that stuff, which is just 2x. Okay, again, for a final answer of negative 2x over the square root of 1, this becomes x to the 4th, so 1 minus x to the 4th. Okay, all I'm doing is plugging in, following the rule. I didn't do an example of tangent, so maybe you guys want one of those. I'll do if y equals inverse tan of 3x squared. Okay, what would y prime be? Tangent does not have a square root, and it's a plus sign. And so all you do is downstairs you have 1 plus whatever u is, 3x squared. And then don't forget, this is the derivative of the u stuff. So the derivative of u would be the derivative of 3x squared, or 6x, for a final answer of 6x over 1 plus 9x to the 4th. Okay. All right. Shorter lesson. You really got to keep it straight in your head, you guys. All of this is our goal here is to get a couple multiple choice questions. This is not going to be a free response style question. You're doing this and maybe you only remember one of them on the test, but all these little things, we take one step at a time. And the more you practice it, the more you do it, the easier it gets. All right. Take care, guys.